A scare early, the Pittsburgh Steelers finally woke up and defeated the Houston Texans 28-21 as the Steelers open up the 2020 season, the oddball season that it is, 3-0 now on the year. I'm your host here, Mike Asti, and this is another Steelers edition of Pittsburgh Postgame on Pittsburgh Sports Live, of course, presented by Pittsburgh Sports Live and SteelersNow.com. And guys, I definitely want you to chat along. I think there's a lot to discuss in this game, going at it solo here. Maybe Alan Saunders will join me. He's obviously at the stadium covering it, but doing those Zoom sessions now that we get emailed here in our new 2020 day and age of covering pro sports. But the Steelers are 3-0. Obviously, a lot to get to. Big Ben's performance, I think, is something to discuss. Ben different than he was in those first couple games. Those first couple games, he looked back. He was rusty maybe in week one, but he definitely looked back in week two against Denver, despite that game being a little closer for comfort than you would have thought. But I think there was a little bit rust evident in this game against Houston. I do think it's clear that maybe the deep ball is something that maybe he still needs to shake off some kinks, overthrowing a myriad of receivers in the game. And if he would have hit on either one or two of those, this game would have been well in hand much earlier. And in fact, the Steelers were in jeopardy of losing this game for a while because obviously the Steelers started off losing this game. That's right. The Houston Texans, who, including myself, many kind of poo-pooed, at least throughout the week, and certainly on my preview show, which you can find there on the mic drop section of Steelers Now, the Steelers Talk section on the website, and then, of course, here on Pittsburgh Sports Live, that Houston seemed like a winnable opponent. It seemed like an opponent that, while good and while a postseason team last year, and of course, we know J.J. Watt is there because, of course, as we know, the three Watt brothers played in this game, only the second time that's happened since the late 1920s. Granted, it happened last year involving the Edmonds brothers for the Steelers as well, but kind of poo-pooed the Texans. Hopkins is gone. They've done nothing but leave the talent that they've had. They've done nothing but see an exodus of players from that team. And it also seemed like while they were really good for a few years, they were never great. They never were a team to scare you. Deshaun Watson, though, certainly can be someone to scare you, as he showed that in this game. He has the deep ball. He certainly is a dynamic, athletic quarterback who can also hit his spots. And I brought it up during the game, which we'll get to as well, that maybe he's a little underrated now. Maybe he's not getting enough conversation around him with all the talk about Patrick Mahomes, who is certainly deserving when you have MVPs and Super Bowl championships for these other quarterbacks with kind of a similar body make and similar make overall and similar skill level. They're going to be talked about more. Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, even Russell Wilson as a little older of a quarterback. Josh Allen today for what he's doing for the Bills. Looks like a future MVP, maybe the best quarterback Bills have ever seen, and that does include Jim Kelly, certainly since Jim Kelly. So a lot of other young quarterbacks, a lot of other quarterbacks that are similar in terms of their athletic ability to scramble, but also just chuck the deep ball and also having the ability to be consistent with their throws and have a relatively high completion percentage, say even higher than what Cam Newton put up most of his career, but he's included in this group as well. And maybe Deshaun Watson's a little underrated. Maybe that'll come to roost today because he certainly showed up today, even though the Houston Texans not able to win. Not being on as good of a team as Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes is probably why he's not talked about to the level as they are as well, both on the two favorites to be in the Super Bowl again. And of course, Mahomes already winning one with the Chiefs last year, Lamar Jackson owning an MVP. So it kind of makes sense why they would catch all the headlines. But the Texans, who were poo-pooed, I will admit, I thought the Steelers would have an easier time in this game. They made this a game. They end up losing by only 7. They end up having a lead early in this game. And then it brings the question, did the Steelers come back? Did they finally turn it on? Did they wake up? Did they eventually play better? I think all of those things did occur. Or did the Texans kind of blow this game? Because defensively, J.J. Watt hasn't always been healthy, but he's a 3-time defensive player of the year. He's a future Hall of Famer when he is healthy, and when the rest of that defense is healthy. They are star-studded and they are difficult to deal with, even with the exodus of weapons. And of course, DeAndre Hopkins now down there in Arizona. Again, feel free to chat along here. Feel free to discuss this game with me or what's going on with the rest of the National Football League, certainly the rest of the Steelers' schedule. They will take on the Titans, Philadelphia, Cleveland, Baltimore, then the bye, and then the Dallas Cowboys. The schedule will get tougher as it goes, but this is a 3-0 football team. This is a football team that was 0-3 at this time last year, a football team that already had Ben Roethlisberger suffering a serious injury and being out for the season. And then, of course, the circus of quarterbacks with Duck Hodges and Mason Rudolph. This is a team this year that is deeper, that has continuity, that certainly has a better quarterback, even with Ben faltering a little bit worse in this game. And Ben finishes 23 for 36 for 237, 2 touchdowns, no picks, though. So not the real errant mistake that could have cost them in this game. Despite Ben maybe not being what he was in his prime, not being what he was maybe even a few years back, but maybe less mistakes and more efficient ball from Ben. Certainly some rust to still shake off. A much more dynamic offense than what you could have had with Mason Rudolph or Duck Hodges if that was the case this year, and what you did see with the two of them last year. So that's a big deal. He's obviously not going to win MVP this year, but he's been very, very valuable to the Steelers, and that is very, very evident this year, maybe more than ever before. Maybe last year was when it was the most evident, when he was not there. So this is a 3-0 team. Tennessee, obviously a playoff team. They went on the run last year, but still a game I think the Steelers should win. Certainly talent level, I think they have more talent than the Titans. Javian Clowney, though, will give Ben problems, I'd imagine. He was not there with Tennessee last year when they went on that run. Philadelphia really struggling. Cleveland better today, but started off struggling. And at the Cleveland, they certainly could split those games, but it's nothing to be scared of. They're going to mess up at some point. And then, of course, the Ravens. And beating them could really help you secure a chance at the AFC North crown, which I thought the Steelers team could definitely win. But a loss there, even though you play later on in the season, could put that in jeopardy because they certainly are not the favorite to win the division. That is Baltimore. Again, this is Mike Asti here on Pittsburgh Postgame here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Make sure, as I see many of you are watching along with me, some of you are chatting, some are watching. I will get to the chat in a moment. But either way, make sure at the bottom of the video, you click on the subscribe button. Help us get this content to you here. Help it be easier for us to notify you when we either upload a video, go live, or really do anything in terms of our coverage here video-wise across our entire network of sites here in the Pittsburgh Sports Now family. Get this tweet up here. This is the little issues with doing the show solo. You're going to see behind the curtain with me also having to run the social as well here. But again, the Steelers are 3-0. That is the most important thing, of course. This Steeler team has maybe not looked as pretty as maybe you would have liked. Certainly there's things to discuss in this game. And while the Steeler team certainly should be glad to be 3-0, you cannot afford to start off trailing in games. You cannot afford to miss as many deep balls and big play opportunities as Ben Roethlisberger and this offense did miss. And I think there's also room to be improved on the Steelers defense, which many talked about, including myself again, for being elite coming into the season. Many thought it could be one of the better units this season in the National Football League, another year together. Certainly talent all the way through. Minka there the whole year. Chemistry should be increased. And while Chase Claypool and a few other young players, Deontay Johnson his second year, first year with Ben, he ends up leaving with an injury, add parts to the Steelers offense to make it deeper. Eric Ebron as well. The Steelers defense also revved up just for having continuity of another season together, but something to be desired this year, certainly secondary wise. Make sure again to also find us on Twitter at PGH Sports Live, where I just threw the link there, as well as at Mike Asti 11 for my Twitter. Now, as I will go to the chat, Steelers are a good team. James Conner, two good teams, two good games in a row. Houston was a desperate Steelers comeback. Houston was desperate Steelers comeback. Ben is more efficient and careful. Conner total yards 149. I'll hit on the Conner thing first. Yeah, Conner was better in this game. Absolutely. Conner was better in this game. Conner was okay in week one, but as Matt Geica and I discussed, Conner was okay in week one. Matt Geica and I discussed it in week two, but Conner was okay in week one, went in there. He then got hurt, of course. So Conner missing most of the second half of that game. Conner able to improve after that with some empty calories later on in the season. And Connor, again, practicing most of this week, able to go here in this one. So Connor certainly was good in this game. It's hard to say Connor has been bad when healthy, but the fact that he hasn't been healthy, the fact that he did suffer that injury in week one, that has been a problem for Connor. That's part of why maybe he's not the featured back, and durability is certainly a thing. James Conner, though, has been good when in there for sure. But you have to remember, and we saw this too in the other week, that there are some empty calories involved in Connor's stats this year. I don't think you can just take the stats at face value, but he's been good. He's not been great. He's been good this season. But I think what happened in this game, and really what's happened this season, where you see Connor go down in week one, as I mentioned, Benny Snell go in there, get over 100 yards. Connor then put up 100 plus in week two, which Matt and I discussed included some empty calories because late in that game, he had a big run after struggling with barely a 3 yards per carry up until that point in the fourth quarter. So the stats were good, but was he really great in that game? I mean, he's certainly been injured. It required being questionable most of these weeks. He gets out there today, and again, another game that he kind of bursted, and you see those big runs late in the game, a lot of empty calories there. Maybe when the Texans defense is finally beaten down, he does get a lot of his yards late in games. So that shows you that maybe when he's facing the freshest defense, certainly their front line, he can't break through as well as once they're exhausted from playing 4 hours of football, give or take a halftime. So that's something to be said. And this game, which also has been the case this season, but this game more than any other, showed that while Mike Tomlin always tells us he wants a featured back, and he does. Mike Tomlin's been saying this for years. He wants a featured back. I used to ask him all the time, is it easier to scheme with a featured back? Is that why you want a featured back? Because it's not the case with every NFL team out there. A lot of championship-laden teams in recent years have not had a featured back, and certainly the Steelers know this from the Le'Veon Bell drama. You don't want to pay a featured back in terms of how you're going to shake out your roster. That's not necessarily the recipe anymore in the National Football League. And if you have a bell cow, if you have a ball toter, like he says, you're eventually going to have to pay him or they're going to leave. And again, what happened with Le'Veon Bell. But that's not how Tomlin's been coaching this year. So he may like a featured back. He doesn't have one. And this isn't a criticism necessarily because they've been able to get the running yards. Maybe this is the better recipe. It does appear to me, and maybe it's just because of the week one injury and they kind of learned that if they didn't already know it. Granted, I kind of already knew it and had been saying it for years. The James Conner's not a featured back. James Conner's a good running back. He's a great complementary back. He can certainly help you move the chains. He certainly can help get the ball into the end zone. His durability is an issue. I would not give him 400 carries in a season and feel like that's going to result in 1,500 yards and him playing most of those weeks. I feel like that probably would not happen. Benny Snell is crucial. Jalen Samuels is also crucial. Granted, we didn't really see as much from him. Anthony McFarland is a part of the future of this team. And I was very critical of that draft pick because I wanted Leonard Fournette. Ended up in Tampa. I felt like if you're going for it this year, you have Connor, you have Leonard Fournette. That's a 1A, 1B. It maybe would make more sense for a win now mode team, even though Fournette would not be there long-term contractually. But maybe they didn't want to deal with the personality. I don't know. Didn't happen. Never really, I guess, was a thing for the Steelers, despite media people like myself speculating and kind of banging on the drum for that to occur. Anthony McFarland was the draft pick out of Maryland. I talked actually with Adam Zielonka, who is a writer for the Washington Times down there in the DMV, who covered Maryland when Anthony McFarland was there. And he talked about the burst that Anthony McFarland has. He mentioned how Anthony McFarland is never going to be that featured back either. He's not somebody that you can be your ball toter, as Mike Tomlin would like to describe it, but he certainly can be a guy that can be your complement and can certainly provide some burst. And we saw that today. We did not get to see that prior. He had not really got involved, but we saw that today. I don't know if he understood the plays more throughout the week of practice. I don't know if it was Tomlin just wanting to throw another running back in there. I don't know what it was, but either way, maybe he wants to see something. Tomlin loves a featured back. He doesn't have a featured back. He has a myriad of running backs. He has a running back by committee situation, which so far has worked, so it's hard to be mad about it. The yards are there. Will that be an issue down the stretch? Maybe not even so much, because recent playoff teams have had success with a running back by committee situation. So this probably means Connor's probably not there long term, but either way, for the present day, this might be the better recipe. And it might be an indictment of Connor individually because he's not a featured back. That's been proven. But this team overall has a running game now, or at least that's been what's been showing numbers wise, 100 plus yards every one of these games, and somebody's getting them. And now again, Connor had a solid day today with the 149 overall, but also overall we saw Anthony McFarland's burst. And you can find that conversation that I recorded right after the draft with Adam Zielanka again about Anthony McFarland on PSL in the mic drop section, and also Steelers Now. So that was evident in this game. The Steelers still have a running game, but it's not a featured back. It is by committee. That's different than what Tomlin usually is used to. Going back to the chat here, David Gormley, we gotta bring up our guy, David Gormley, our number one subscriber here. He's almost in every one of these chats, no matter what sport it is. Do the referees call holding penalties anymore? Can't really recall any today, or any penalties for that matter. Well, there certainly were some penalties today. David Gormley also brings up the play calling, which I'll get to in a moment here with Randy Fichtner, who was roasted most of the day on Twitter. And of course, Steeler fans hating the offensive coordinator is nothing new. But as far as penalties, there definitely were some. I guess they weren't evident. I didn't feel like they were really, really evident. Obviously, Tomlin not getting that challenge, something that I actually thought he should win. Tomlin rarely winning challenges, so maybe he's just cursed. But I thought maybe that was a challenge he should win. So that's something to bring up, I guess, bringing up penalties or missed calls for that matter. But penalties, I guess, did not really get involved in this game. And as far as holding in general, this is what my grandfather would tell me years ago, and I think it's still evident in today's National Football League. And it's one of the few things that is still evident today that maybe isn't different than the past of the National Football League. It's the fact that there's holding on every single play. There's holding on every single play, but it's only really holding when it's called. So I don't know if there's any closed door meeting. I don't have the ability to really dive into the ref's mind. They did join the Steelers at practice this week, but that's as far as we can do in terms of covering the referees. But they are seemingly maybe letting them play a little bit more. I don't know if they're being nice because there wasn't a preseason and there wasn't as much of an off season. They feel like there's rust there, but there's holding on every play. There's always been holding on every play. There's going to be holding on every play in the future. It's not like these guys are not holding. I don't want to say that. So these guys are still committing the holding. Maybe it's not being called as much, but I don't have those numbers in front of me. Play calling here, and that again, the line that is with Connor. Yeah, the offensive line's had a good season. That certainly has helped Connor for sure. Connor needs to get out of bounds. I think that's something to bring up. Connor does, and he had a good day again. He's not a featured back for me because of durability. He's a part of a committee, which we saw in this game, the Steelers using a committee. But I do believe that Connor needs to preserve himself because he is still critical to this team. Him and Juju had tons of pressure on them entering the season. Juju has mostly answered it. Connor kind of has, but still has had the durability questions from week one, which can bring up the problems. 18 carries, 109, 6.1 per touchdown, and a 25-yarder. Yeah, that's a good day for Connor for sure. And obviously some yards also as a receiver, 4 catches for 40 yards, an average of 10 per with a 13-yarder. But he does need to preserve himself. He does not need to be getting hurt. No one's going to call him a wimp or anything like that. The guy's had a career of injuries, and this has nothing to do with the cancer diagnosis. He needs to preserve himself. He is critical to this team, even if he is not the legit featured back. But again, today he had the bulk of the carries. He had a good day. His durability is a question for me, but we got to see something from Anthony McFarland, who I mentioned earlier. We got to see something from the rest of the Steelers backs, which is important to this team moving forward, to have a backup plan and to have more than Connor, who 18 carries, he can't get 35. That then would lead him to be getting hurt. We've seen those be good day yardage wise, and then him get hurt and miss the next week. That's going to be the problem with Connor probably. 6 carries, 42 yards for Anthony McFarland, average of 7 per, had a 20-yarder. Benny Snell, 7 for 11, 1.6. Not a great day for him. And again, Benny Snell football, trademark, as he likes to put it. He's a fun-loving guy, flashes those pearly whites, loves to talk to us in the media. I actually remember training camp last year, which would have been his rookie season out there in St. Vincent, when we can do the normal thing and be out there in person during training camp, that practice under the lights, Friday night lights at their high school stadium out there in Latrobe. Went up to Benny Snell, asked for an interview. He said, well, of course, man, I can't say no to you guys. And I joke with Alan because, of course, you can say no. We've had Steelers say no to us tons over the years. Certainly, these Pittsburgh athletes are comfortable with saying no to us. but he didn't think you could. He was very, very nice and certainly obliged me. So he's still been like that. I don't know if he wants the limelight. I think that's kind of the case. But either way, he's a nice dude. I'm rooting for him. Hope he does well. I think he has a spot on this team. I think you could imagine 500 yards out of him per year as a number 2 or 3 back, a guy that'll stay on the roster. That's fine. I don't see more than that from him. As much as I'm killing Connor and saying he's not a featured back despite good days, I certainly don't think Benny Snell's better than James Conner. I think that argument was dumb just off of 1 week when obviously Connor went out and Benny Snell did do well in week 1. I don't think there's anything really to say that other than 1 week of football, which I don't think is fair. So Benny Snell, a rough day today. Anthony McFarland may be emerging as that complementary back with James Conner, who needs one, but maybe it is Anthony McFarland moving forward. Again, Mike Asti here on the Steelers Now, Steelers edition of Pittsburgh Postgame here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Make sure to click on the subscribe button bottom of the video while you're watching and chatting along with us, and I'm really liking the chat. It is heating up here for us. I'm going to hit on now Randy Fichtner, because that's where a lot of you guys are going in terms of play calling. A lot of play calling, thumbs down. I saw Randy Fichtner getting blasted on Twitter most of the game. And my first reaction is, of course, and this has been a thing for Steeler fans, and it's not necessarily isolated to Steeler fans. It happens with most NFL fan bases. But the popular thing to do is to love the backup quarterback when the quarterback is struggling. That's one thing NFL fans love to do. And that even happened a lot last year with Ben out and the fans switching their allegiance to whoever was the backup when Mason Rudolph or Duck Hodges was in and not playing well. And the other thing is to kill the offensive coordinator. Most NFL fans, no matter, even if their offense is putting up 40 points a game, they don't like the offensive coordinator. If a play doesn't work out, they're going to bash the offensive coordinator. I think it's too early to tell. I even saw some colleagues saying the man should be fired already. Once again, this is a team that put up 28 points. I get this is a team that maybe you'd rather see put up 30-plus points. Maybe you'd like to see them put up 35 points a game like you did see this team put up a few years ago. But I would like you guys to remember that when the offense was putting up 35 points a game, when the offense was playing very, very well and the defense was not up to snuff and the defense was letting that offense down, I was sitting there in the press box at Heinz Field while the Steelers offense put up points. The Steelers offense lit the lamp and the defense sucked up the joint, and they lost that playoff game to the Jacksonville Jaguars at home. During that season, you guys killed Todd Haley as the offensive coordinator, but numbers-wise, the offense was putting up points. The offense, and I'm not to say Todd Haley was perfect or didn't deserve to eventually get the axe because that relationship with Ben was not working out, but the offense had the numbers. The offense had the stats. He could at least point to say, I'm putting up 30 points a game. If we're not winning championships, it's not necessarily because of this offense, even with all the drama of Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown. So, and again, you're dealing with a lot of locker room cancers and a lot of drama there. I think part of why Ben maybe is more efficient this year with less interceptions, even if the numbers aren't there with the yards and TDs, is because he doesn't have to worry about forcing balls into AB, who's going to jaw at him and complain on the sideline. He can really just diversify the offense and find the open guy. And we've seen that this year more than really ever before with Ben Roethlisberger, which is a great thing. But as far as Randy Fichtner, again, I think it's fun to kill the offensive coordinator. I'm not going to be here to say that he had a good day at the office. They put up 28, but that maybe was almost seemingly more Ben coordinating things. I don't know. He's yet to open up a rivalry with the offensive coordinator like he did it with Todd Haley publicly. But Randy Fichtner, maybe a little too conservative at times. And then other times, just crazy play calling in odd territory situations. You see second down be a second down and short, and he's chucking it. And okay, maybe you try something there and make it up on third down. Maybe you give him a pass there. You see a late yardage situation, and you see him again trying to do the opposite of what kind of makes sense or which is the easier play. He doesn't seem to stick to conventional wisdom. He tries to make his own thing and call himself an offensive genius, I guess, per se, with how this game was called. This game, more than the others, seemed like it was Randy Fichtner trying to put his stamp on the game, and maybe he did negatively. I don't think he needs to be fired off of a 3-0 team that score 28. He's not going to be fired. The Steelers don't like, this is what I think fans don't get. The Steelers don't like, and this is a post-game show, so I'm not going to do a mic drop rant here, but the Steelers don't like firing guys. This is what I've said about Tomlin for years when people keep calling for Tomlin's head. The Steelers, even when they underachieve, they don't enjoy, they don't relish. The Rooney family does not want to have to fire somebody. Yes, they fired assistant coaches over the years. Never fired a head coach. Those head coaches left after Hall of Fame careers, which is probably what's going to be happening with Mike Tomlin. But they fired assistant coaches over the years for sure, or politely asked them to leave, even if not a literal firing. And they don't like it. So they're not going to do it unless they have to. If you are 3-0 and your offense is putting up points, even if there's questionable calls involved, they are not going to be firing the offensive coordinator. The Pittsburgh Steelers do not like firing somebody. They do not want to fire somebody. This is a class-ridden organization. This is not an organization that is an organization that has a quick trigger either. They don't do things knee-jerk reaction off a few bad plays in the middle of a game. If you guy had a bad day at the office, yet they still won. That's not going to lead them to firing somebody. They will fire you if they really need to, rarely middle of a season. If season does really not go the way it should, they clearly will make moves and they want to get better. They're not afraid to do so with the assistant coaches. But going into week 4, 3-0 with a team that just put up almost 30, that's not going to be a day that you're going to be firing your offensive coordinator. I just don't see it, but certainly some questionable calls. We will see what happens moving forward. This offense seemingly clicked on all cylinders more as the game went on, but Randy Fichtner got killed today on social media. He was certainly not a popular guy at all. The Steelers moved to 3-0 on the season with a 28-21 victory over the Houston Texans. The Texans, a rough schedule early on. And that's not a team that I thought would be a playoff team. I did think Hopkins leaving would be a big deal. That is not a team that has as many weapons as a year ago. Maybe J.J. Watt's healthier, but they are not as good as they were a year ago. And Watt has been known to get hurt towards the end of season. This is still early. So I'm not surprised they're losing, but it was a rough schedule. The Chiefs, the Ravens, 2 Super Bowl favorites. The Steelers, certainly to me, a playoff team, if not a division favorite. And then it's not going to get any easier moving forward for the Texans either. A pretty rough stretch for the Texans, who are most likely looking at 0-4 to open up a year. And they've done that before and come back from an 0-3, I believe, but it's unlikely that's going to be the case with this team. Again, though, Mike Asti here on the Steelers edition of Pittsburgh Postgame on Pittsburgh Sports Live. You can find this postgame as well as all our postgame coverage that Alan is putting up there on the site as I'm speaking over there, SteelersNow.com, and also on social at PGH Steelers Now on Twitter. Going back to the chat there, Joe McLaughlin's been chatting up a storm. Gormley, I agree. They spread the ball a lot, and Eric Ebron made the best play of the day. Claypool continues to electrify. Juju, pay the man with a Super Bowl. To be a sign of the offensive line with 100 plus, I think that's fair. So Joe kind of saying the offensive line also needs to get some credit for what's going on with the running game. Absolutely fair. It was critical this offensive line was better this season. And again, to be fair to Mason and Duck, the offensive line was not great a season ago. It made it harder on them. Connor also hurt most of last year, certainly the latter half of last season. They do have a myriad of running backs. We've seen Benny Snell get over 100. We've seen Connor get over 100 a couple times. We've seen a solid day from Anthony McFarland as a compliment. That's running back by committee for me. It is not really a featured back for the Steelers, and a lot of empty calories in Connor's numbers. But the reason why you can have so many backs get 100 and why so many backs can do well, because yards per carry, it's pretty much all over 4. It's a good day at the office for the Steelers, certainly today. The offensive line got to get credit. The offensive line has to get its due. The offensive line is usually always responsible when a quarterback has time or a running back really performs and is able to turn yards, especially getting that second run through the pocket. So they're creating space. They're having a good day. The offensive line had a good day, and they're having a good season. The offensive line for the Steelers absolutely has been good, so that is fair. Hitting on Ebron and Claypool. Well, I said this on Twitter right before I went on the air, and this was a pretty popular tweet, so I know why, because it's true. Chase Claypool was a great draft pick by the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that just cannot get said enough by Steelers media, and the fans certainly seem to be aware. I'm sure the Steelers as a franchise are aware of it. The other end to that is where I'll get to with Juju, that I do think he was basically drafted to replace Juju. And if Juju is not around to the future, which has been reported by my esteemed, illustrious Hall of Fame colleague and Ed Bouchette, most likely contractually, if Juju had a great year this year, he'd won too much money and they wouldn't see that it's necessary to pay a wide receiver. If he didn't have a good year, they would let him walk because then he had not established himself yet as a clear number one. Hurt last year without AB, and then the other 2 years with AB, despite greatness from him. He's played well this year. He's certainly scrapped in there. He's been great blocking wise. He's got some big plays. He's put up the yards. Juju's been playing like a number one this year. So maybe we're wrong there. We'll see. Again, 3 weeks. I'm not ready to say I was wrong until we get maybe 8-9 weeks into the season and he's still doing it. And he's healthy, because that did not happen last year. But that doesn't mean I'm going to go back off the point of him leaving. If he performs this year, and Chase Claypool is an example, and everybody kind of agrees with this too, say what you want about Kevin Colbert and the management in terms of their draft resume, the Steelers have been wonderful at drafting wide receivers, maybe the best in the National Football League over the last 15 years. Kevin Colbert might honestly be the best executive at drafting wide receivers. And maybe it's not just him, of course, but he's going to get the credit because he's the guy at the helm, and they have been awesome at drafting wide receivers. From Plexico Burress, and this isn't in any particular order, but Plexico Burress, Antonio Holmes, Mike Wallace, Emmanuel Sanders, obviously Hines Ward mixed in there, to now with Juju Smith-Schuster, Antonio Brown before him, one of the greatest picks ever for where he was selected in the great career that AB did have before being a complete lunatic and kind of squandering it. Certainly a Hall of Famer based what he did on the field. Dynamic receiver and revolutionary was Antonio Brown on the field, to be fair to him. And then Juju, I mean, out of USC, he certainly is at a program that he's going to get recognition, but a lot of those games on national TV were after 10 p.m. in the East Coast where Kevin Colbert lives. And separately, I don't think anybody thought he would be what he's been. I mean, rookie year was Randy Moss-like with 900 plus yards receiving, had a better year than AB even playing with him. Last year, not so much. This year, he's been good. We'll see if he can keep getting greater. But Juju's been better than expected, I'd imagine, in terms of the national media when he was drafted. And Kevin Colbert knew. He keeps saying it, and you can say it now in retrospect, but he keeps saying it. He knew. So they've always been able to draft receivers. But one thing that's all been as well, and one thing that's they've had in common with that is, man, it's already 31 minutes here. This is it's show goes fast when you're having fun, especially when you're doing it solo and you have chatters here. After a Steelers win, I thought it was going to be a loss and we were going to have a lot of venting here. Might have been even better for business though, churning the engagement and our value here on this video. But I will say Juju's had a good season, but I don't still have confidence in him being here long term. But Chase Claypool was drafted in that with that in mind, because while they've been able to draft receivers over the years, they've also seen receivers leave, whether they choose to leave or whether the Steelers choose to have them leave. They've been able to replace them. They've had no problem replacing them. And every time people wonder, oh man, how can you let Mike Wallace go? How can you let Plexico Burress go? How could you let Antonio Holmes go for just that draft pick, despite his off the field issues? AB, even at the time, oh man, you got to get more from him, even though he's nuts. You got to get him off the team. You got to get more from him. It's all worked out. They've been able to replace. And Chase Claypool fits a similar Juju style. He didn't get to be involved as much in this game, and did have a key drop late in this game. So this wasn't his best day, but he is good. That was a solid pick by the Steelers, and he is a part of the future of this team with or without Juju, and I do think he eventually replaces Juju, at least as that slot guy that can burn it and go deep, if not him fitting in as that number one clear receiver, because he doesn't have that same maybe overall talent of Juju, but a similar style for sure. Again, the Steelers win it 28-21. Alan probably not joining me here as he's still churning coverage for us over there on Steelers Now with our post-game coverage. Usually the beat guy is not going to be available, so it's going to be myself solo or with a co-host, most likely Matt Geica here running our post-game shows here for PSL. Got him to do that, so we'll see. Today is his anniversary, though, his wedding anniversary, so I had to give him the day off for sure. But we will see if we can get somebody else, maybe a former Steeler, maybe a player, somebody else moving forward if Matt can't go. Either way, I'm happy to have you guys chatting along here, because having the chatters does make my job much easier for these post-game shows, especially the gauntlet that I had this weekend doing a post-game show for every football team that we covered across our Now network. But the Steelers now 3-0. They have Tennessee, Philly, Cleveland, Baltimore, then the bye, and of course, Dallas. So talk Ben, who good, not great, more efficient this year, but still question marks about the deep ball. Certainly needs to be better there. Seems like too quick of a release for Ben. I don't know if he's rushing it because he's afraid of the rush. He did say in the offseason he was a little nervous, so I don't want to put that on him. But the deep ball, not good here today. The deep ball just was not good, and it could have put the game in doubt because they missed several big plays. And again, this team got down early. Maybe the Texans are a little better, but they've had a really, really tough schedule. I don't think they're that great, though. I don't know if the Steelers slept through it, if it was just one of those typical Steeler games where they have a rough time at the 1 p.m. kickoff early on. I don't know. Johnson being hurt is a big deal. Left, obviously, in the game with a concussion and went through concussion protocol. The decision was made that he would not return, and the game was still well in doubt at that point. He is somebody that is emerging as a key contributor to this team, maybe even a future number one. Some had said if Juju would leave along with Claypool, maybe Claypool fits better in as the number two. He is a stud. He was great last year with Rudolph and Duck. You want him a part of the future, but you want him healthy. It's about his health, number one. I do think that regardless of his health, and hopefully he's back soon, we'll certainly cover that on the website and tell you the updates there that I right now don't know, but maybe Tomlin talked about it while Allen was with him on that post-game Zoom session, that he's no longer going to be doing the punt returns. I feel like Ray McLeod III, to get his full name out there, is going to be that Steelers punt returner. I'd imagine him returning punts next week against the Titans. He doesn't have really another spot on this roster, so it does suck that you're taking one just for that role, but maybe that's the thing these days now in the National Football League. The Steelers usually do not love a receiver who, once he becomes a part of the offense and is here for a few years, only the second year for Johnson, but this was the case with AB. This has been the case with others. You do it for a while. They eventually then putter you out of doing it because they want you to be a legit receiver for them. So I wouldn't be surprised if after you see this concussion issue, and he's not had a great career as a returner this season, certainly not. Ryan Switzer gone. But Ray McLeod imagining to be the guy even if Johnson returns, and he'll just get back to work as a receiver. No problem there. Secondary-wise, got to hit on this before I wrap things up. The secondary had a rough day. Talked about it with Matt last week, talked about it on my own in week one. Every post-game show seems like the norm, despite the Steelers winning and the defense receiving a lot of hype. It is one of the better units in the NFL, at least on paper, certainly talent-wise. But, and we talked about this in the offseason with Minka every time we were on one of those Zooms. What are you going to do? What do you think the team's going to do with now the defense or the offense is being able to scheme against you and try to take you out of things to avoid you? It's almost like walking somebody in baseball. You can take you out of the game, even though you're an elite player, take your bat out of things. And he said, oh, no, don't worry about it. I'll be fine. He kind of dismissed it every time, almost came across like he was insulted by the question. It was in no way an insult to him. He was a Defensive Player of the Year candidate last year, and along with TJ, maybe would have won that award if they would have made the playoffs. And the only reason why they were near the postseason is because of him and TJ in particular. He's still able to be part of generating turnovers. This defense is still able to generate turnovers, even if not to the amazing clip of last season, but still a quality amount of turnovers they are generating week after week, a lot from the secondary. But the secondary also getting beat play after play. You've seen that for touchdowns this season. Joe Hayden has had a rough go despite a couple interceptions. I love the guy, but got to be fair. Steven Nelson has had a rough go. Minka has been kind of taken out of things. Players have avoided him. Quarterbacks have avoided him. And he got involved late in this game with a few tackles, kind of get in there late to almost pad his stats, it appeared. He didn't get to make the impact he made last year. I don't know if he will ever be able to. Last year, he came out of nowhere, traded to the Steelers. Some question the move. It was great then. The contract's still good. It's not in any way a bad trade because he'll be a part of the future of this team, and they wouldn't have been able to draft a better safety. He would have been that best available player, which is the position they needed to draft anyway. So that doesn't mean the trade's bad, but he's not been able to have an impact this season because he has kind of been taken out of the game, and that's just been the case. Steven Nelson, though, and Joe Hayden need to be better. They seem old. Those two guys on the field, and again, I hate this because I do really like Joe Hayden as a guy, being around him. And I think everyone in media does, but I got to be fair. I say I'm fair, so I have to be fair. Joe Hayden's a great dude, but him and Steven Nelson appear, and they are veterans. They are veteran corners who've been around. They've been Pro Bowlers. That tandem could make this defense overall elite to help that secondary, but they appear to be old. They're good. They're good at times. You see spotty plays that they make. They certainly can still flash brilliance at times, which is why they were Pro Bowlers in the past. But there's other times that you think this is an older player. This is a player who's not as good as he once was. There's not as much youth there in that Steelers secondary. And the guys they did draft recently, Justin Lane, etc., they aren't being put on the field to have an impact either. And it's going to be Steven Nelson and Joe Hayden, but they just are not getting it done to the level as maybe you'd like. The cap will be a problem. The cap's going to be a problem, which is why I don't think Juju's going to be back. That's going to be a problem for another guy. We talked about TJ Watt's impact, and he is a sack machine, a future defensive player of the year. Enough said. Certainly the best Watt brother on the field. Derek had to leave with a knee injury. JJ did not really get to dominate this game by any means. And TJ was the best Watt brother on the field today. A future defensive player of the year like his older brother JJ's won 3 times as he's going to the Hall of Fame, regardless of the rest of his career. TJ is going to get one. I'd certainly imagine, if not this season, and was a favorite by many coming into the year. But part of maybe what could take away some of those numbers, but make the overall unit better, is Bud Dupree. And Bud Dupree was here first. They talked about it on the broadcast that he ushered in TJ, mentored him, even though TJ was maybe going to be a guy that could take his spot on the team if Bud didn't figure it out. Bud was a guy that Steelers fans loved to hate on a couple of years ago. He really turned it on last year, had a phenomenal season last year, very, very underrated. Vince Williams, another guy that I think is underrated when you pair him with Cam Hayward. And Vince Williams had a good day today as well. But Bud Dupree had a good day again today. He's had a great season. But this is a contract year for him. He is not going to be here long term. If I had to bet, and I don't think Juju will be back long-term either. That's why I think this season is very, very important to win now, to seize this day and carpe diem now, which is why, again, I wanted this team to make some maybe stronger moves in the offseason to win now. Granted, they still can, and they're still 3-0, one of the favorites certainly to win the AFC North along with the Baltimore Ravens, and they will play in a few weeks, so we'll see. Is Bud Dupree playing well? But I think that if I had to rank, Bud Dupree is least likely to be back. Juju maybe second least likely to be back, and then anybody else can be thrown in there whose contract is up. Bud Dupree is just going to get paid, but it's going to be by another team. He's going to get paid tons of money, and the Steelers are not going to match it because they're going to feel like they got to pay Juju, or they got to pay TJ, and maybe even they prioritize Juju over Bud, which I would not, because they've been able to draft receivers so well. I would not do that. But Devin Bush is another linebacker that's had a solid season so far. It's a different spot on the field. I get it. Inside backer versus outside backer. But Bud Dupree is going to be gone. I guess I'll just say that. I feel like regardless of Juju, regardless of TJ, Bud Dupree is going to get paid by somebody. He's going to get paid tons of money by somebody. He's making tons of money. His agent going to be very, very happy watching these games. But he's probably not going to be a Steeler after this season. So enjoy him while you can, not to make this a somber post-game show here. I touched on the running backs being by committee and Connor not really being featured, but the running back by committee group getting it done to this point. Those are kind of some things I wanted to touch on for sure. Again, I think Bud Dupree is just not going to be back, unfortunately, because I see that in the chat again as well. He tweeted that he's fine. I'm not sure who you're saying there. You're talking about Deontay Johnson. He is all over Twitter. We tag him in something and he retweets it right away. So if he says he's fine, I'd imagine him playing next week. We'll get that covered again to you, SteelersNow.com. Deontay Johnson, a big part of this offense moving forward, even though he had to leave this game with a concussion issue after seemingly failing the concussion protocol, which is why he did not return, and that game was in doubt when that decision was made. Okay, David, appreciate the help there on the assist here on the post-game show. So he tweeted that he's fine. I'm going to take your word for it. Then that's good. You obviously want to be fine as a person, but also a big, important piece of this team moving forward, maybe even more important than Chase Claypool possibly. So I'd imagine he's back next week. I would also imagine he is not returning punts, not only to preserve his health, but also with the fact that Ray McLeod III performed adequately as a returner. Didn't break one, but certainly performed well. The pass rush is keeping us in games. Yes, it is, Joe, and that is big because they threw up that graphic middle of the game that the Steelers are approaching record-setting territory for consecutive games with at least one sack. That is thanks to this Steelers pass rush. That is to the line, that is to the linebackers, and that is a several set unit of players that haven't always been there through that stretch. Back in 2016, this goes to a game against the Patriots, which is one of those games against the Patriots, of course. And they're getting into territory with the early 2000 Buccaneers that won a championship doing it with Warren Sapp and company and John Lynch. So yeah, this linebacker crew, this pass rush crew, the D line, the D ends, everything. It's just phenomenal, and it's keeping them in games. It's helping them win games for sure. And I can't even imagine the time the Steelers would not get at least one sack. They become a sack machine this year. Looks like I actually might get Alan. So Alan asked me if I'm still on. If he's able to, or if he joins me soon, I will throw him on. So we will see here. I'm going to be wrapping up soon. As I type to Alan, sorry for this. Actually, we're probably not going to be adding Alan on. He's still needing to find somewhere quiet. Yeah, so I'm just going to be probably wrapping this up without Alan. We'll try to see what happens here. I don't know if there's anything that he saw at the game that's different than what I saw here. Normally I'm with him at the stadium. I said to a colleague of the day, this is the first in about 5 years in a mix of different media outlets here locally that I've not been at the stadium through almost every Steelers home game. I might get there later on in the year if there's a conflict for Alan, but he's our main beat guy. So it is a lot for me not to be there, but still able to kind of watch it with you as a fan and then touch on things afterwards. So happy to be able to do these post-game shows if I was there, because covering Steeler games in person with keeping to Tomlin's time and having to get so much because there's so much to cover when you're covering an NFL beat, maybe even in comparison to college, that it takes the two of us usually. I don't necessarily admire Alan I do admire Alan, but I don't, I guess, envy him for being out there. It's definitely got to be rough doing it on his own. He's been doing it with me the last couple of years and has not had to do it on his own for the Steelers until this season. But obviously COVID, it makes it tougher. They're not going to throw both of us out there, but we'll see if I can get there later in the year. See if anything's out there in the chat before I do pass this show on. And again, I do appreciate all you guys chatting along with me. This has been a little longer than I thought for myself here, but I'm doing basically a full post-game show solo. So that's because of the chat activity. So we definitely appreciate it. If you don't already subscribe to this channel, make sure you click the subscribe button bottom of the video. You get a notification when anything is thrown up there, whether it be a uploaded video or a live show, anything. It's all there from a myriad of sites now covering pretty much the entire Pittsburgh sports region, which now includes Central PA with Nittany Sports Now, certainly includes even West Virginia with WV Sports Now, obviously Pittsburgh Sports Now, Pittsburgh Hockey Now, Pittsburgh Soccer Now, Pittsburgh Golf Now even. So we might start covering Tiddlywinks and Bocce, and I certainly would love to talk about those two sports if need be, and I say that for the trolls out there who say that to us at the Now Network. Cornhole too, it's covered nationally. Why don't we here at the Now family? But you want to make sure you click on the subscribe button because it makes it easier for us to get content to you if you don't want to follow all those sites or you don't even want to follow us, any of us on Twitter. Make sure you hit us up here throughout social for Pittsburgh Sports Live, Pittsburgh Sports Live on Facebook, at PGH Sports Live on Twitter, pghsportslive.com for the channel with all that video content left there archive-wise. And then also at PGH Steelers Now on Twitter and Steelers Now on Facebook. And of course, SteelersNow.com for all our post-game coverage, all our weekly coverage, shows like this, my analysis, my coverage, my programming, all there. SteelersNow.com, myself, Alan, and the crew dominating you there with Steelers coverage. I definitely will say that and brush our shoulders off. That's a humble brag that I think is true. It's not just me saying it. So I'm going to close up the chat now. Again, the Steelers do get the victory. The Steelers winning it 28-21 over the Houston Texans. Now 3-0 on the year. So they face a formidable opponent in the Tennessee Titans based on what they did last year. I think it's still a winnable game for the Steelers, though, despite Javion Clowney now being a member of Tennessee. Philly definitely winnable. Cleveland definitely winnable. Baltimore, that'll be rough, but a big game, and the team has talent to be able to maybe get up for that game. They usually do get up for those games, even in down years for the Steelers. The bye, nice to have it middle of the season during a pandemic year. That's nice. Tomlin prefers that. Dallas, and then the schedule does get tougher, but not too tough. This is still a team that 10-11 wins is not ridiculous, and certainly could be a team that could vie for the AFC North crown certainly at the minimum a playoff spot with now the expanded field. I would be shocked if they don't get in with an expanded field, even though they did not get in the last 2 seasons. And now Ben is there. That's a big difference, even with him not being perfect. Ben goes 23 for 36, 237, and 2 TDs. No picks today. So more efficient Ben, even with less yards. The secondary, a weak spot of the defense, needs to be better, is why they can get down early in games, which was almost a problem today. The Texans maybe blew this game more than the Steelers won it. Connor, good. Not a feature back, though. This team is running back by committee, no matter what Tomlin will say about loving a ball toter. Doesn't have that this year. They're spreading it around, and it's actually making Connor better and making it easier on him. Hopefully, make it easier on him to stay healthy. Steelers have a myriad of weapons. That's true with Juju, James Washington not as involved today, Chase Claypool, Eric Ebron, who I didn't get to, but he's going to have a major impact on this team. He finally did today. I think anybody who was saying, oh, it was a bad signing, they're waiting too long to use him, he can't fit in with the offense, what's happening with Ebron through 2 weeks? It's a new player, even a veteran on a new team with no preseason. I've talked to former players who all said that was going to be incredibly tough, of course, on rookies, but also even on veterans. A lot of veterans going to new teams have struggled this year. That includes Tom freaking Brady, the GOAT that he is. So Eric Ebron will figure it out. This team will figure it out with him. Ben Roethlisberger finding him in the end zone, loving him as a security blanket. He's really going to help Ben the rest of this year. And I said it when it was done. I said it when the signing happened. I will say it again. I still believe it, despite him only really having one good game earlier in the year, and it was today here, that Eric Ebron is going to be the best offseason move, certainly by the Steelers, but if not by any NFL team this past season, for what he will do to the Steelers offense, what he will do to help Ben Roethlisberger, and the impact that he will have as a pass-catching tight end who also can block and be dynamic. He is even more dynamic than Jesse James was, than Heath Miller was, than Vance McDonald, certainly, who's still here. He is going to have an impact. He did today. Expect that more. Happy to have him on my fantasy team, despite the first 2 weeks. I struck with him the first 2 weeks. Happy to get those rewards here today. He will keep on dominating. You will see even more from Eric Ebron, I'd imagine, going forward. But the Steelers, of course, they are winners. And another big game in conference. So what's at stake? What's at stake in that game against Tennessee? Another conference win to kind of continue that trek of trying to secure a playoff berth and win the division against a team that is not explosive on offense. So this defense could feast, even though Jadeveon Clowney and company will make it potentially hard on Big Ben. The Steelers win it 28-21 as they now move to 3-0 on the season. So the Pittsburgh Steelers, they weren't the best defensive effort on the field at Heinz Field this weekend. That actually does go to the Pitt Panthers, to be fair to them. But nonetheless, the Steelers do enough. The offense finally wakes up. Ben spreads it around. Ben is efficient enough. You see the emergence of some players for the Steelers on offense that maybe were not there getting it done as much through those first 2 weeks. Some question marks around the Steelers defense, certainly secondary-wise. Definitely room for improvement for this Steelers team. But even as the schedule maybe gets a little tougher moving forward, the Steelers are winning games they had to win. They are winning games they probably would have lost the last couple of years. They are winning games that they could lose with the way those games open up, as they certainly open up struggling in this one. And all of that is a major positive for Mike Tomlin, for Ben Roethlisberger, and this team with high expectations around this year, despite the last 2 seasons. So again, make sure you hit us up all throughout the Now family of networks. Make sure you find us here on Pittsburgh Sports Live and subscribe to this video and click that subscribe bell bottom of this video here and on this channel. The Steelers now 3-0 on the year. That's the most important thing. Survive and advance. They do enough. The standard is the standard. The standard is higher than this. Steelers have room to improve, but either way, the most important thing, they are 3-0. So thanks again for the chat activity. Keep following along, and I guess I'll talk to you guys next week.